Hi, Chris Speaks here with DC Overby, one of the first people I had the pleasure of interviewing when I started this channel a couple years ago. Civil War historian, military man like myself, got a lot in common, and we're gonna have an interesting chat tonight. I think he was wanting to ask me about something, an article I'd written.
Yeah, so I know that we've had some conversations about some of the changes that have been taking place regarding politics, especially on the Republican end of things, and how that might relate to the African American community, and also how it relates to the Civil War era. So before I even get into that, I give a proper introduction. I think that that is helpful and respectful to what you're trying to do. Um, so most people on Facebook, and I'm on like social networking, of other kinds, but pretty much everything I do is on Facebook because I find that everybody that I'm cool with, who's like-minded, who want to do meaningful, cool, inspirational, or even talking about controversial things are on Facebook. That seems to be the common denominator. Although I I play around with Instagram, not so much. I do play around with other forms of social networking, but Facebook is where most people know me. They know me as DC Overby. However, uh, that's not the name I was born with. My name is Darren Charles Overby, originally from Poughkeepsie, New York. I now reside in Arlington, Virginia. What helped me transition to this area is I was attending school at Howard University, and in a kind of unfortunate but very real experience, I did not acquire my degree, although I aspire to within the next year or two to kind of get back into the swing of school and like acquire that degree in history. When I was in school, I was studying history and secondary education. I did not drop out because uh, I was lost. I didn't drop out because I was so terrible at classes. I was distracted by some personal matters between, um, it's a long, Forrest Gump story, but I would just tell you that, personal matters at the school and at home, if things are not in harmony and they're not in together, kind of working together, or they're working against each other, it could really it can distract you from the mission that you have on
Absolutely.
your right? And so like you don't want to be in school and just like wasting all this money and time and effort. It's very, stressful, and especially doesn't do well when you got, either it's more localized or even, more global events taking place like the pandemic and how it, impacted the economy, the ability to have work, while the school is becoming more expensive. So, but now I'm able to revisit going back into school because I've spent
Good.
time in the army, and so I have a GI Bill that's just sitting there that I need to do something with, right? I mean, you don't
Yeah.
have the
No one
army,
that.
yeah, doing all this crazy stuff, being out in this heat or real cold. It's usually the extremes. It's too hot, it's too cold, too wet, too dry. And
Yeah, let me say one thing right quick. I don't want to cut you off. That's one
yeah.
thing that aggravates me about these people saying, they want Biden to pay off, the debt. Like, man, go sign up for the military for 3 years, four
Hmm.
years. You get your education paid for.
Yeah. So, that's where I'm at now. Working with some people trying to get proper guidance, mentorship to complete this degree. Um, I know it'll make it happen. And I'm very spiritual. And I do believe in a God, and I do believe in having passion and purpose for a reason. So I know it's gonna manifest. So that's kind of like where I'm at. Uh I'm currently currently, like I said, in the Army Reserve. I work for the Department of Army as a federal employee, and that's kind of like where I'm at right now. Um, you
So you're in a
know,
good spot. I mean,
I'll say again.
you're in a good spot. I mean, life could be worse.
Yeah, I mean, I'm blessed. I could things could be way more chaotic.
Yeah,
You could have nothing, no shelter, no ability to eat, right? So,
there's a lot of people out there
um,
like that.
God, and I mean that both specifically and generally, because like some people uh are, some other people might listen to this and they might be atheists or agnostic or, but I do believe whether we're having a conversation on a Christian God or just talking about the universe, I do believe things happen for a reason, and I'm just kind of going with the flow. And I think I'm in a blessed, it's an opportunity, even when it's hard or stressful. There is an opportunity for
When it's a
growth,
challenge, it's an
So
opportunity.
I'm grateful for it. Yeah. So yeah, man. Ask me some questions, man. Let's 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 have the conversation that we said we would have.
Okay. Well, let's start with that. The I read that article, and you said you felt like I was conflicted. That I was angry about that. Um, I felt that and I don't really consider myself a Republican or a Democrat. I consider myself somebody. There's issues on both sides that I agree with. But
Yeah.
we have an African American female who wants to join the party, and she's trying to grow the party, and then you basically tell her you don't want her in there. Um, I was really angry about that. I was really angry to see this woman mistreated. Um, I called the chairman of the Alabama Republican Party every day for a week, calling GOP. I mean, you think I got any answers from them?
Hmm.
No. Um, Same thing happened to another female there, and here you are. That I think that the Republican Party could have made some great inroads in the African American community because I mean they're socially conservative, religious people. A lot of serving in the military. There's inroads they could make there if if they put forth the effort.
Yeah. It's kind of very unfortunate because and I will put this disclaimer out because I know that you have a large following from all over the political spectrum, but many of the people that you're cool with and you might vibe with are kind of more on the more conservative end of the political spectrum. And I will open up with you and I will tell you that when it comes to the political spectrum, I do, for the most part, lean left, but I'm a moderate. I'm a moderate left, and that is with uh, still maintaining some of my conservative ideas. I'm someone that has grown up knowing that I might lean to the left slightly, and I have a more progressive state of mind. That I do know that I have to still keep my ear open to conservative ideas and people because that's what creates balance and order in society, right?
Exactly, and I'm okay
Like
with
yin and
people
yang,
being liberal. I have many liberal friends. We can talk things through, and
Yeah.
go back to where it was back before we had just everybody had to toe the party line, and there was no let's work this out. I mean, I have a lot of Democratic friends.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
we may not agree with everything, but I'm not going to let that at the end of the day
Mhm.
ruin how I feel about them as a person. We may disagree on a political issue.
Exactly. So that disclaimer out. Um, that is to get rid of bias, but I put it out so I can really keep it real with people and so that way for those people who kind of think like I do, because I know there's people on the right that think like I do. I could show them that there is a common denominator and we can just have like conversations without like flipping out at each other and name calling and stuff. I do crack jokes with people. I know you've seen me a couple times, but I don't
I love it. I appreciate humor.
yeah, but I try not to get into it too deeply, like, when it comes to the negativity. So I try to keep it light-hearted, light-spirited.
I've
Saying
only
that,
had.
I'm going
Okay,
saying,
wait.
no, I'm listening. Go on.
Oh, okay. All the interviews I've ever had, I've only had two that really went hostile. And there was this guy who's running for the um, he was running for senator here in Alabama. He's African American, and he said he's running as the black candidate for the black agenda. And I said, what does that even mean? And as the
Mm.
conversation keeps going, he starts demanding, he said, your people, owe me reparations. And I was cool with it for a while, but he starts getting hostile. And I know this is probably a bad joke, but I said it. I mean, I ain't gonna hide from it. I said, okay. I said, I said reparations. Okay, that's fair enough. Well, first of all, give the white people the reparations for all the property they lost because it was worth $22 trillion to their southern economy. He flipped his lid on me. But I mean, I was just making it as a joke.
Yeah,
Um,
I get it. I mean, it probably wasn't well placed if the audience is hot and not um in a place to receive that, Me, I have had conversations with people that are radicals on like both sides of the political spectrum. So I try not to like take anything that anybody's saying to heart. If it's not a good joke, I might make a smirk and be like, you know, but I try to hear where they're coming from because even if I don't agree with you, I still have to listen to you because anyone who's like, for instance, if you're like a lawyer, if I want to have a conversation, debate where at the end I want you to really understand or even value my side of things more than what you're saying. First, I gotta provide respect to you, right? So that way you would even listen to me. That's one thing. The other thing too is I need to listen to you because I need to hear the weaker or vulnerable aspects of your argument so that way I can prove to you that my way of thinking is, I don't even want to get into the word superior, but just look at it from this point of view and maybe you might rethink what you're saying.
we kind of think outside the box. There's a
Yeah,
lot of people. I
right.
mean,
Yeah. So, you know, hearing what you said again, that could be interpreted many way, even by me, by many ways, especially if I'm like hot and bothered, you know. Uh, but I will let you know, uh, I will let you know that you have to kind of just you got to know your audience. You got to know the
yeah,
timing. It's just like if it wasn't about controversy and it was like comedy, you can have an excellent joke. But if you don't lay down the punchline the right time and the right way, that can get you booed off stage.
it was like when you remember a couple of years ago when Biden said if you don't vote for Democrat or if you vote for Trump, you ain't black.
Hmm.
That just totally backfired on him.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, yeah. Hmm.
and it's a lot of my black friends here in Alabama, they laughed it off. Um, and it seemed like you know, the northern African Americans I heard talk about it took more offense to it than the Southerners did.
Yeah, I would probably say the reason why that might be is because Northerners culturally, and it doesn't matter what your ethnicity is, doesn't matter what your race is, even though I cannot stand that word. And I'll be able to, if you ask me later, I'll be able to break that down why. But no matter what your social background is, uh, in the North, people wear their feelings out open. And they don't do things like they aim to please. Northerners tend to, especially if you're somewhere like in New York, you're in Boston, Philly, you
Mhm.
know, they're gonna keep it real. I'm keeping it real. And they're gonna just put it all out there raw. If it's nasty, they're gonna, because they're like, at least I told you what I really thought. Whereas in the South, again, doesn't matter what your ethnicity, even when they're insulting you, they will say something like, "Oh, bless your heart,"
Bless your heart.
right? That
Yep,
is an insult. I know because
that
I
is a
have
good
roots in
thing.
the
Yep.
South. When they say bless you, child, bless your
Bless
heart,
your heart.
you
Yep.
know, it's an insult. But in the South, it's about hospitality. It's about aiming to please. You know, uh,
Some good points
sometimes,
there.
huh?
That's some good points there.
Yeah. So even if, uh, you know, even when a Southerner is like mad, they tend to like, they'll chuckle and they'll laugh and they'll try to turn it into something else. But Northern's like, nah, nah, you about to change this story all around. I'm gonna keep it real. I'm gonna tell you straight to your face what you said, how it made me feel. And so like that's something that you might have experienced when you were having that conversation with that person. And Biden sure, wasn't able to escape from that either. I know personally, I did not think what he said was well placed. I think he could have definitely said that better. You know, of course, it's a little biased because I lean more towards his ways of doing things. I'm probably going to give him more of a benefit of the doubt. But, you know, I think what he was trying to say was given, we're just talking about political platforms, given the platforms to explore how they can benefit the African American community. That's like all in the quotations or in the subtext. That it should be like a no brainer. That if you are uh trying to have a relationship with the government and have that relationship with that government actually benefits you, then on the Democratic end, um, it depends on your perspective. When it comes to the government actually intervening and providing support and services and things like that, then the Democratic Party is providing more of that. And it's like you're saying, like if you're about the community actually gaining something from the government,
Well,
if you don't pick that side, then you
let
you
me give you
know
my thought on
you're
that.
not you're not of a it's not just of a black state of mind, but you're not of a because this
From what?
goes back to I'm finished this thought.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
Going
sorry.
back to Africa, traditionally, people of African descent have been more communal, thinking about the community, putting the community before they put, you know, anybody else. Even to the point where, if somebody comes into a black community and they start talking smack about it or whatever, they're all gonna, even if there's I would say a little bit or a lot of bit of what you're saying is accurate, the community will literally, like, people that didn't get along with each other will band together to now come at your neck because it's like, no, especially what is being black folks growing up in a white controlled European controlled system. The odds are already against us. We can't be at each other's necks, within the community. So we'll like now not fight each other. We'll like come after the person who's trying to talk about our community, right? So, it all relates to kind of like what, Biden is saying, but here's the problem. He can know that, and it's good to know that from a political standpoint, right? If you're trying to run a country and you're trying to work with a black community, But he doesn't say that. Like somebody like Al Sharpton or you know, I'm not even talking about whether you like him now. I'm just saying, like, I'm giving examples of
Yeah.
like leaders in the community, you know, Jesse Jackson, these type of people. If they say it because they are a part of the community, they know that these individuals, even if we don't necessarily agree with everything they're doing, they are spent decades, you know, decades fighting and supporting the Black community. So even if they have any flaws, it's like, well, they above, you know, they're part of I don't know, 5-10% of individuals who are educated and well spoken, who are out here doing things. So even if they do something wrong, we're going to give them a benefit of doubt because they are part of our community, trying to help our community, you know. So that's you know, when it comes to that heat that Biden was getting, especially from African Americans in the North, it's, first of all, Northerners just say what it is that's on their mind, you know. And then there's the other part too. It's like, even if you're right, you can't say that because
Well, let
you
me
got to
ask
be
you this.
part of this community to say that, you know.
I think one thing, if Biden had had a different host and he had laughed, I think it would have went really different.
Wait,
But
you say again?
I think if there were a different host, like a Dave Chappelle type or somebody that, and he laughed at Biden's joke, I think it wouldn't have got the reaction that it did.
Oh, absolutely. If he had this conversation, especially if it was Chappelle, if it was a comedic, like, uh, excuse me, I'm sorry. Somebody was calling me and they were
Okay.
interrupting the call. But sorry, I just want to make sure that it does not cause any issues or we get disrupted.
And the other question I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
ask you, do you not feel that the Democratic Party comes around every 4 years, makes promises to the African American community,
Mm-hmm.
gives them some, just basically, few dollars and crumbs off the table, and then takes their votes for granted for 4 more years?
I mean, this is the conversation that we've been having for decades. To be honest, putting it all on the table,
Yeah.
all parties make promises to their people, and all of them help them out with a little bit, and all of them, you know, also fail on making many of their promises. So this is not specific to the Democratic Party, but if we want to focus on the Democratic Party right now, I would tell you this: a large part of the Democratic Party is, you know, it's a combination of like progressive thought and pioneering, uh being the first to try something, and then the combination of those two, and when it relates to hope, it will put you in a situation where it's like, all right, we have these 10 things we definitely want to do, we're gonna do it, and then like you go 4 years, 8 years, and like out of the 10 things you only accomplish like 2 or 3 of those things, right? So then it's like, you know, that is something that comes especially with hope, you know. Something that I had personally had to explore, especially relating to spirituality, like the difference, there's a major difference between um faith and hope. Like hope, you have you create this great anticipation, you know, excitement for things that you want to, you know, you want to happen, or you're tricking yourself, uh are that you're capable of making it happen. Whereas like faith is something like, all right, well, I'm gonna do the best I can and just kind of live my life, and if it's meant to be, then it will just land in my lap anytime. Again, the hope doesn't relate to you know, this is something that comes with hope, and hope doesn't associate to any like political ideas, any philosophical ideas of any kind. So like it doesn't matter. There's always going to be that we had 10 things we wanted to do and we only got 2 of the 10 things done, you know. Is that specific to the Democratic Party? No. That's what I'm sure right now, especially right now, there's some issues going on in the Republican Party. Like there's whether you
Oh
want to say
yeah.
there's two factions or like there's four factions, whatever. There's
I think right
different.
now you have the Trump faction and then the few opponent him. Which let me ask you this. I got an interesting question for you.
Mhm.
So I was looking at these poll numbers and over the years, and black males usually was polling around 12 to 15% with the Republican Party. Females were like 3%. But with 18 to 33-year-old black males, Trump was polling at around 35%. Why do you think there was that connection made between young black males and Donald Trump?
I don't know if it's so much of a connection as it was it was trying something out that was new. And I'll explain where I'm getting from
Okay.
that. So you got to think, all right, people were on, at least in the African American community, they were kind of on a high, right? When it comes to having not just 4 but 8 years of Barack Obama. It
Yeah,
didn't even
absolutely.
matter. It didn't even matter how good or bad you thought he was. The idea that they were able to manifest somebody that was not white Anglo-Saxon, you know, Protestant, land-owning male, in this role, because even white folks that even white folks that were women have had issue getting that role. Even white people that are Catholics have an issue. That's the reason why it was such a big deal to have John F. Kennedy as president.
Yeah.
It's a big deal to have Biden as president because
When
of him being
Lieberman was a
Catholic.
vice presidential candidate, remember, it was a
Yeah.
Jew.
So the idea that they were able to take someone that was deemed as the lower rung of society and put him in that position, that means that it has many many simple and complex uh things that are associated with that. Some of them are like, well, we didn't even think they would be possible to get somebody. So now everybody has to revisit their ideas and what they think is what is possible. So, you do 8 years. Some people have a mentality of like even a savior mentality, like, oh, I'm not of the when I voted him, I looked at him as a pragmatic politician, someone like FDR, someone like Lincoln, great politician, right? Not like a God, right? There's some people that were like, oh my God, we made it happen. And so like wherever you stood, whether you just simply looked at him like a man in political office or like almost like a godlike person, godlike being, once you get at that 8 years, now you're like, all right, we went so high spiritually, mentally, about what's going on here in the country. Okay, now what's next? The options. Think about the options that were provided to us from the Democratic Party during the time. Okay, um, I think people wanted an Obama-like figure to stand up and you know, take another try at it. There wasn't anybody. Our choices, I mean, we had a variety of choices, but the top two were Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. Now, politically, it actually makes more sense for us to lean toward, and I'll explain. I'm just talking about
I know
politics,
where you're going
winning
with this.
elections. I'm talking about strategy now. It
Yeah, I know
makes
where you're
more
going.
sense for you to pick the Hillary Clinton.
Absolutely.
And the reason why is because she is a more moderate
You're moderate.
Democrat that has an open ear to conservatism. Right? She actually grew up as a conservative, believe
She's
it or
more
not.
conservative than Bill ever was.
Yeah, she flipped when her and Bill Clinton started running for office later. They had to change their views in order to, and it was better for both Bill and Hillary to work on the liberal wing of the politics. But they've always had their ear open to a more conservative way of doing things, partly for good reason. Like I was telling you in the beginning, it's about yin and yang in order to create balance and order in society, right? So it makes more sense to do that as opposed to Bernie Sanders, who, even though I agree with some of his ideas and things, that it was a radical and very polarizing uh way of doing things. So even
He
if
didn't
it's
have a bill that could have got out
yeah,
of Congress.
but it's like one of these things where even if I supported Bernie Sanders publicly or secretly, that the end result actually might be adverse to what I want, because sometimes you can get the person you want, but not knowing where the country stands at that moment, where everybody is politically, you can have somebody in the more radical end. And like when you're trying to get stuff in government done, you can't, because people are like, whoa, you're too far this way. Or even if it's like people, there will be people who will support him and want to get behind it. But it's like, if I'm associated to you, that we might make that happen. But then because in my state, it's kind of balanced out regards to more liberal and conservative people, I might lose my election next time.
Well,
So,
what are you running for?
huh?
What are you going to be running for?
What am I going to run for?
Yeah.
I'm not running for anything. I'm trying to focus on
Oh,
my
I thought you
family.
said. Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood. I thought you said you might lose your election. I thought you meant you was running
No,
for
no,
office.
no. I'm not running for nothing, but I'm just letting you know. I'm just letting you know that, like, for instance, Bernie Sanders, whether you support his ideas or not. All right, let me back up.
I liked
And it,
Bernie.
huh?
I liked Bernie.
I do too, but this is the dilemma when you pick people on the more
We didn't have a bill that
extreme,
would ever got out of committee.
huh? Yeah,
He
like
didn't
his
have one.
ideas would not be considered,
Yeah.
and it's like you're investing your vote in someone who has great ideas but does not have a uh a strategic and pragmatic way of actually getting the laws pushed through and the policies pushed through. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
it's almost
exactly.
like your vote was on the right person, but it's kind of wasted at the same time, because it's like, is it actually going to get through? There's that. There's the other part, what I said before, which is whether it's just about him or anyone to be associated to him. Like, suppose it's Virginia or New York or Alabama, wherever it is, right? You picked the right thing to do, but because your state might be more conservative leaning and you do the thing that you think and is right, the next time there's an election, you don't win the election. So that what you got done now is going to go backwards, because you're not in the position. You got to vote it out.
So I got another tough question for you. Um, and I don't know what his motive was, but why did Donald Trump? I mean, for years, seen all kind of pictures, members of the African American community. I mean, Sharpton, Jackson. Why did he flirt with these white supremacist groups? I mean, I remember the debates. The Proud Boys, stand by, stand back, but stand by. I mean, what?
It was his only option. You got to think. Donald Trump came into power very similar to how, like, Andrew Jackson came in, and he split parties and created factions too. Came in, shucked the establishment up, not just within the Republican Party, but in the Democratic Party. People are like, look, man, I had a good thing, whether I was doing the right thing or I was doing the wrong thing. But now that you came in here and shook all this up, now everything I do is in uncertainty, or that I have to work harder to prove to the people that I'm legit. He just made it more complex and more challenging for everybody. And it was like, some people were like, well, that's a good thing. And it's like, well, not when it comes to just acknowledging what truth is. This is what he did. He shook up the country so bad that people don't even understand truth. It's okay if there's a truth that you don't agree with. Like, there are things that exist in the world, in society, that are there. There's a person that does this thing, and you might say, I don't agree with that policy, or I don't agree with with how they're doing it. But the idea that we're at a point now that, maybe we're coming out of it, I don't know, but where somebody would say or do something, Donald Trump would come and be like, that was never said. And now people are just trying to question, yeah, is he right? Was it even said? And then it doesn't help when you got all this technology too, like AI and artificial forms to represent a person or a situation. So people are just in straight confusion. And so like it was already going to be like that without Donald Trump. Donald Trump coming here just amplified and made it even worse. So he didn't just impact the establishment. He just like messed up everybody. And the
So,
reason and I just answer your question. You asked me, why did he get kind of in cahoots with like hate groups, and why did he get in cahoots with you didn't say it, but it's implied, like the whole Russian connection and all these basically, you know, uh this kind of axis or like group of controversial, negative, or just odd characters. Well, when you mess up things with the establishment or the main body of your party and they don't want to work with you, you got to take whoever can come your way. And that's what it came down to with Donald Trump. He was just trying to like, he's like, well, him and the people were advising him like, all right, well, what is your base? They had to take time to figure that out. Once they figured that out, like, well, you've said some wild and controversial things. What can we do with that? You made even made it harder for his strategists how to make things happen. But they said, well, at this point, we're not even trying to do what's right. We're just thinking about, it's like a business standpoint. How do we get the votes? How do we get the votes? Well, if we can get the votes from a hate group, then we'll take him. If we can take it from the Proud Boys, then we'll take them. If we can take, that's what it came down to. I don't even personally, I could be wrong, and I've been criticized about this too. I don't personally think that Donald Trump he's not the grand wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. I don't look at him
yeah,
as Hitler. I don't look at him the way I look at him. He's like a modern day Andrew Jackson. Um, very controversial, shook up the system for no freaking good reason, just make it crazy. I feel that he is a less successful robber baron, like those people after the Civil War that just, his specific area is real estate, but he puts his mouth and his effort and his time and his money into whatever it is that he can get money, whatever it is they can build the Trump brand name, right? But he's not like out here thinking, oh, what can I do to plot against the black people or Latinos or whatever. It's
right.
not even it's not about being against somebody. It's about loving himself and how to boost his own ego and how to
That's
get
what
money
he
for him.
gets
His
is the
own family,
adulation.
his own family said it's not about race, or it's about money. That the only color that he cares about is green, right?
And
And the
and I
only
think now the adulation of the fans that he had even overtook that was such almost so power. When he would walk out there
mhm,
in front of 40,000 people, that that
he
that
he
take
was
over him.
yeah. And to get fame and to get money and influence, he would screw over his own family. He would screw over. Right now, he's cool with his sons and daughters or whatever. But if he needed to, he would. We see it. There's
Yeah.
factions in the family now. If he can do
But
that with his own family and friends, he gonna do that with the country.
let me ask you another
Uh,
question. You said something a while ago, and I want to make sure if I understood you right. You said that Donald Trump kind of blew things up. After that, do you think that after 8 years of Obama, the country was going to take a step back as far as
absolutely,
but Donald
absolutely.
Trump?
Now
Okay,
we can relate it to the Civil War era because that's how we were supposed to. So you got to think what happened with Abraham Lincoln, and in a period of what from 1860 to 1865, all these radical changes. I mean, it also included that period right before he was being president, he was running for president. uh and even for the kind of the legacy part of his presidency after he was assassinated, the work that was carried on by Andrew Johnson. All right, all this time of them making radical change, and when it comes to specific to the African American community, I'm always gonna make reference to that because of who I am. But they use language like taking the bottom rung society and bringing it to the top, right? When they did that, now the change was made, but it shook up things so, depending on where you were in the country, what your ethnicity, gender, your class was, things of that nature, it really shook up things really bad for you. That was the main reason why I established the Reconstruction, because they knew it didn't matter if they passed the laws. The change is going to be very hard to even maintain. This was also the main reason why. Now, I would say that there was many successes with the Reconstruction, but for those things that weren't successful, the reason why they weren't successful is because that 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 radical change, at least through some people's perspective, was so bad that they would literally do anything and everything to make sure that Reconstruction would end. So when 1860, 1863 to excuse me, 1865 to 1877 is a period where United States attempts to mellow out and to kind of do a couple different administrations to make it less polarizing, less radical, calm it down, try to get back to business. This is the reason why we go into the Gilded Age, where these business leaders are trying to go back into investment, and they're trying to build railroads and get into oil and all that stuff, because it's like that there was too much, like, it was too much of that. All
Do you,
right. So what happens is, what happens is, it's like, eh, 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 when you have a period like that, especially for the people who are desperate, they try to turn everything backwards to, and I'll use the whole Donald Trump, the MAGA statement of, let's. I remember when things were great. I remember when things were great. Let's go back to when it was great. You know, um, you know,
right for who?
and so you can have an idea of like what's going on in present day. Like, you have someone who's part of the lower rung of society, even with his education and money and his ties and everything like that, based on historical perspective of how they seem, like, people of African descent. He's lower rung, and then he becomes president, and then he does all these things that are, in my personal opinion, most of the stuff he did was very radical. I mean, not radical, but moderate. But for someone who's not part of African American community, who is more conservative, especially if you're a racist, your world has been turned upside down. So now the response to that is to try to turn everything backwards. They did that same thing with Abraham Lincoln. They did that same thing with Obama. After that time spent, it's like, let's try to get back to when it was great. But
So,
you have to
so let me
now
ask you a
explore
tough
what
question.
great means. Huh?
Let me ask you a tough question. Do you think that in Reconstruction, when disenfranchised, white males, and you had blacks that were senators, lieutenant governors, I think one actually became a governor. Do you
Yeah.
think that set race relations back where it took decades to recover? I mean, because here you had these guys that were slaves a couple years ago, and now they're the senator and representative, and you're a defeated, Confederate. I mean, can
Hmm.
you? I mean, do you don't think there was the animosity that? Um,
No, I've had discussion, and people have made arguments on both sides, and I've heard of it. Depending on what the topic is, for the most part, like, I'm going to disagree with the idea that uh the radical change was, um wrong, or that it was not needed, or it could have been done different. But when you kind of dissect it into specific things, I can tell you, um I can tell you, I understand, maybe not sympathize and empathize, but I can understand why somebody would say that Reconstruction wasn't, successful, or why it wasn't needed. To not speak vaguely, and be specific, some of the things I'm talking about with people, like, for instance, Reconstruction brought a bunch of HBCUs into existence. They didn't all weren't all HBCUs being historically black college or universities, right?
Yeah.
Not all of them were established during Reconstruction. Some existed prior to it, like Lincoln University, and there's a few other places that existed during or before the Civil War. But the great bulk of them were established during Reconstruction after the Civil War. This is a great success. It's stuff is also a success that, despite all the ups and downs and the different culture changes and political changes, everything, that those many of the institutions still exist today, and they have purpose and passion in what they do, and they help to uplift not just the black community, because, like, if you're at Howard, where I was going to, you'll see that even with it being historically black college and university, because of the cost and because of the knowledge that's being taught, they have other ethnicities, other genders, other groups of people that are getting pulled in these institutions. And so it's like, that's definitely a success of Reconstruction.
Well,
Okay.
didn't so many blacks get done wrong? I mean, like, come down there, no skills, no money, no jobs. Like, okay, you're free. Go, you're free. I mean, what
Um
were they going
uh,
to do?
of course, but it didn't matter if they did a gradual or a immediate ending of slavery. They were going to have that problem anyway, because if they did a gradual approach, what people would do is they would still, well, I mean, that's kind of like what happened. They ended slavery. All right, they gave people rights through the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. The 13th ended slavery, 14th equal protection under the law and citizenship, 15th Amendment gives universal male suffrage, right? So they gave these rights, and then, because they gave them, people still ended up gravitating to, like, a more gradual approach. I think it was one of them, like, flow charts, that it didn't matter what route you want to take, it was still going to go, like, gradual. People were going to still put
I see
obstacles
what
in the
you're saying.
way. To It didn't matter. So if we took gradual, it'll make people feel, like, emotionally, like, easy, like, okay, well, maybe we can adjust to this. But they would only just extend out that process. So it was just like, just get it done and over with. It was one of them things where, like, when you're trying to pull a band-aid off,
Yeah.
just get it over with. Just get it over with, because it's just time. The time is up. Well, and then, people were, well, what about this? And what do we make a compromise on that? And what? No, no, no. Well, you guys in the North, you guys had slavery, and we should have our chance. And it's just like, you're talking about all of this to justify what you're doing, but you know that it's wrong. And we also know that this has to come to an end. I mean, anybody, like, if we reflect on the work of Adam Smith, who was, through Eurocentric perspectives, the father of economics,
Oh, yeah.
and he was a mentality. I think it was the book Wealth of Nations. He's talking about
Reformations, like,
slavery. It was going to end because you get more productivity out of a cheaply paid worker than you do a slave, because a slave will plateau after all the yelling and the hitting and the whipping and you know slaves will end up enslaved people will end up doing this doing either one of these things. They're going to revolt, which causes
that's
fight
all
and casualties and death, or they're going to run away, which impacts your money because you spent money on property and now that property is run away. Or you're going to get a enslaved person that's loyal, who's going to do just enough to get by,
that's
and you're
why I
not getting
think
you're not getting what you need out of the productivity. But if you put a system and cheaply pay workers, And you say, well, today, if you work hard, I'm going to give you 5 cents. But if you
Right.
work really hard tomorrow, I'll give you 6 cents.
And hear me out on this. That's why I think the Confederate government, up until the end, they made the right decision by not arming the slaves. Because, like what you just mentioned, vote. Would you like to be the guy that walked on the plantation with 100 slaves and say, all right, we're fixing to give you these muskets and teach you how to shoot, and we're going to put you in the army? I mean,
Mhm.
you see how that's going to go? I mean, that was not going to go well. If
I
that
mean,
was,
it potentially for the army to fight, but turn on the Confederacy, or they could be loyal to the Confederacy, but it's like we're not getting the productivity. We want you to get out there. We want you to kill these Union soldiers, but you're like just doing just enough to get money in your pocket and doing just enough to, to check the box to say you made a manpower contribution to the Confederacy. Then there's the aspect of like, well, if they are truly loyal and they prove to be some of the most best, greatest warriors for the Confederacy, then we're gonna owe them. We're gonna owe them what? We're gonna owe them freedom. Oh, if everybody's
they
free,
didn't
who's
even
doing the
promise
work?
them. They didn't
If
even
we're
promise them
freedom,
freedom when they passed the act in, what was it, May or March of 1865. They wasn't even guaranteed freedom when they was arming the slaves.
yeah. So, you know, the most notable experience with blacks being armed in the Confederacy was in Richmond in March of 1865. Um, One of the other examples that I see that can be really backed up is down in New Orleans, where they had the
Louisiana,
first Louisiana Native Guard, which didn't last long. Well, for one, that group of people,
they got
most of them were
disbanded.
Creoles or people who wanted to identify as white, and they were just saying, look, we helped New Orleans and other wars like War 1812, put us to work, and you know the Confederacy was like at least a national level. Local level felt maybe a little different. National level, like, no, we see all blacks the same. Don't matter if they're mixed white. We don't. We feel uneasy about it for the things that I just talked to you about. And then those people that are that are local to that, they're like, well, maybe we can use them for like a home guard or police or whatever. But people are just like, that still might there might be more harm in doing that,
Right.
or even if it's not harmful. Again, if we put them to work, we're gonna owe them stuff. We're gonna owe them freedom. We're gonna owe them money. We're gonna owe, like, we're already having a hard time taking care of our wonderful white folks here in the Confederacy. How are we gonna have any resources or any money to take care of them and
You
still have
mentioned
people to work on our plantation?
the two companies that was in Richmond. I've heard a legend that they were actually engaged at Sailor's Creek. Have you ever heard that?
I'm not sure. I haven't heard of that, but what I will say is because even some people in your group, they may have made reference of like so-called Black Confederates and like my group, like the Black Phalanx, by Joseph T. Wilson, who was a Civil War soldier, and they take reference out of the book and say, well, he even talks about a Black presence in the Confederacy, and also in George Washington Williamsburg, was it the War of, think it's called War Rebellion. I just know uh George Washington Williams has a few books, and one or a few of them he explores that. Um there shouldn't be any doubt on either side of this whole Civil War discussion of whether there was a black presence in the Confederacy. There absolutely was. That's not the question. The question is, how are they participating? You know, and also to talk about the stuff we've already talked about. So, they were there. Most of them are unarmed. Yes, there are some armed situations. They are considered exceptional. We find that most of these so-called Black Confederates are are either mixed in ancestry with white that are
They
armed.
passed
Like
off.
in the first Louisiana Native Guard before it is federalized and made a United States Colored Troops unit.
Mhm.
Okay, with darker complected people, or in the instance um or in an instance where there are Black Indians, Black Seminoles, and other tribes that are, are mixed with African descent out in areas like Indian Territory, who are not, they're allied with the Confederacy, but they're not fighting for the Confederacy. They're fighting for their Native American nations, and they're trying to fight against manifest destiny from the federal government. So when you dig deeper, you find out this stuff that yes, there were Black folks there, and there was a Black presence in the Confederacy, but people who are like propagandists and want to make it something more than it is and try to make them into there was 200,000
Black.
African American balloon rangers that dropped from the sky, proudly supported Nathan Bedford Forrest and other Confederate leaders. Like, those people have just lost it. They
Oh,
have
they
lost
totally
it,
lost it. I
you know.
mean,
But
that was
yeah,
we're talking about 3,000. There was a 3,000 man brigade in Jackson's corps. I was like, no,
yeah,
there wasn't.
yeah.
And that group, because I've never hid the fact I'm a Confederate sympathizer. I'm Bar Shelby Foote's line. I can never turn against Alabama, even though the cause was wrong. It's still my home. But to those guys, I've been called a carpetbagger, a
Mm-mm.
scallywag, um,
Mhm.
Yankee lover, uh,
No.
Southern hater, and I'm like, guys, I'm none of those things. I'm just not as hardcore, lost cause is what you are, and I hate to say it, but some of them are ardent racists.
Hmm. Exactly. I mean, propagandists and stuff like that, but just relating it to some of the other stuff that you've talked to me about. Um, you know, some of the stuff that's going on in present day relates to the stuff that took place during the Civil War era. We've talked about we've talked about Trump and his like base, for instance. Many of these people, are that have that state of mind, propagandists, hateful, just justifying all types of forms of confusion and negativity. Um, they're doing that because there's a loss of influence and power in government. They're starting to see that that what they had before at least appears to be lessened, and now they're on the same footing or the same level with some of these people that they used to dog and and treat like crap and treat lowly. And it's not specific. This is not specific um to the Confederates, because we know that there are conservative. It's not even necessarily conservative, but there are people who are of that kind of old way of thinking in the North as well. I know plenty of people. I keep on finding out more and more people in the North that think like that. So, some of the things that we are seeing and experiencing present day right now is because of these major changes that took place in the 1860s. And then again in the 1960s, because we talked about how there were all those changes that took place during Reconstruction, to the point where people were like, oh, hell no. So when 1877 came in, they tried their best to change everything to back to when America was great through their eyes. And they
Right,
maintained that for what, almost 60, 70, 80 years, until people like, John F. Kennedy and these people are coming to, almost 100 years later to actually uh manifest and maintain the things that were already enacted after the assassination of Lincoln and after the American Civil War. That's what you're seeing. You were talking about your I don't know if she's your friend or
she
just,
contacted me because nobody would tell her story,
yeah.
and she found my website, and I said I'll be glad to take up the fight with you.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
shame. It's a shame because African Americans, their first political um and their first involvement in U.S. politics is where they're officially recognized and allowed to vote and have a say were with the Republican Party.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's just stupid. It's stupid. It's racist. It's ethnocentric. It's nativist. It is probably a little bit of sexism. Some people are always drinking that woke shit. This is not. Excuse my language.
No,
It's not about being woke. It's just acknowledging the reality that you know, like one, you're disconnecting African Americans' heritage again because they have strong heritage in the Republican Party from
mhm.
the Civil War era. Two, this is the other thing. You're just stupid because whereas you should be trying to get support wherever you can get it. Doesn't matter if it's
Everywhere.
white, black, Latino, whatever. If you discriminate people who are of your party, one, you've lost that support. Two, you might even push that potential support to the opposite party. To the opposite
And there's
party.
going to be moderate white people that are going to be turned off by that.
Yeah. And yeah.
Because let
There
me tell you
there
this. I
yeah.
interviewed this guy. He's head of the Young Republicans. And I was talking to him, and we were not interview, this conversation, but he was talking about he worked for this candidate and he's going to run for a seat next time. And he said, and we ran against this woman. He goes, are you recording me? And I said, no. He said, are you black or white? Well, I'm white. And he said, well, there's a difference between a black person and it says N word. He
Oh,
said,
like
our
I'll say
candidate.
no. I'll say it for you, and then you can go back to say just like when Chris Rock and a few other comedians said there's a difference between black people and niggas. Is that what he said?
That's what he said.
All right, you can
And
continue.
and you know, I held the phone for a few seconds and I said, son, because he's a good bit younger than me, I said, you sound like some of the 80-year-old people I knew when I was a kid who were not thought they weren't being racist when they were saying stuff like that. I said, I don't know where your thinking is right now. I said, but you need to really reevaluate your thought process and watch who you say something like that to. I said, because I could write an article right now and you would be banished.
Well,
So
this is see. I get your point of view. I also get why he's saying it too, because like when you're in the black community, sorry, because I'm in this car, and if I lose you, I have to call you right back because my phone only has so much juice. I only have so much
yeah,
power. But when black people say that, like Chris Rock or whatever, they don't actually mean that these black people don't exist, and that they're not black and that they are, if you're not black, therefore you are a nigga. They're not saying that. What they're saying is that there are certain people. It doesn't sound nice. It doesn't sound pretty, but this is one of these conversations that people have when they're not running for office. This is one of these conversations that people have when they're at the bar or they're just like I'm shooting the shit with you right now. I like watch me. I'll run for something later, and then this conversation comes. But I will say it. This is people say that when they're like doesn't matter whether you're a liberal African American or a conservative African American, there's a group of people that will fight against any positive or meaningful change, even if that means within their own life, and they cause destruction and all types of stuff. um and so when they're saying it, that's what they mean. And it's significantly different from when white folks say, or any other group of people say, oh, that's a nigga. Their definition of nigga is different. Their definition is just like, first of all, they group all black people, doesn't matter if they're from Africa, Caribbean, North America, they're Afro Latino, they just group everybody. You dark and complected and you're doing something I don't like, therefore you're a nigga. That's what they mean. It's very like they group everything on once, and it's riddled in like racism, ethnicism, ethnocentrism, nativism, all that. When black people say it, they're very strategic, not strategic, but specific, in what they mean, and they're talking about there are people that are on both liberal and conservative wings of the party, or not just parties, but just political ideas, philosophical, whatever, You're trying to have meaningful conversations like this for the better the for bettering society, however that may be. And those people are like doing everything they can to avoid people having meaningful conversations, positive conversations. They're just in the way.
Black folks
And
actually
oh
use it
wait,
as a
let me
form
say
of
this.
endearment too.
Last thought. The other
No, I'm
thing too
sorry.
is when black people say that, they're not of a mentality of, because we see them in this way, that they should be taken out. They should be arrested. They should have an extreme response to put them in their place. That's not, when they say that, that's not what they mean. They're just talking about there's a difference between these positive, meaningful, powerful black people in the community that are trying to not just do better for their own community, but for the world. Whether you're liberal or conservative in that group of people, it has a way different meaning than
Yeah,
when like somebody white says it. It's
but
just
I
different.
still like it's a term of endearment because I've heard black people say, "Hey, that's my nigga Chris." There, you know.
Yeah, I don't even really like. I very rarely, if even done that. I'm not a big fan of the word myself.
And I feel
I
bad about
grew up.
even saying that in front of you just then, but
No, like I don't take no. We're having a man to man conversation. Like I don't freaking get riled up by you saying it's a word. Because guess what? I've had people who have never said the word nigga and they've never called me a nigga. But guess what? They treat me like I'm a nigga. And there's people who said nigga this and nigga that, and you're my nigga. And that is like that's, and those people are my blood, like my family. I would like do anything for them, with them. So you got to keep in mind that it's a word. Yes, there are, it's taboo and it's controversial, and there are places that you don't say it, and yeah, there's all that. But it's also, people make it way bigger than it needs to be. It's
yeah,
a word. That beyond the word. There are people out here who are not even using the word nigga, and they treating you like you are.
that's true. Well, that's a very good point. I
Okay.
mean,
So, but we need to, because you and I, we often talk about the Civil War stuff, and we need to know that a lot of people that are enduring what they're doing right now is because unresolved issues from the Civil War era. You know, Reconstruction was going to have to happen. It was going to happen gradually. It was going to happen immediate. The same flow chart was going to take place. People were going to try to jump in the way and fight against it, and not just people of Confederate state of mind. Because you got to remember that compromise in 1877 that took place. Those were
right.
backdoor deals that take place because they wanted the Republican to win.
Hmm.
See, they knew that black people black males anyway, they were allowed to do a political activity, vote, and be in political positions, right? And serve in civil service jobs and things like that. So they were doing everything they could to use them to maintain their power, control, influence over the nation. When they realized that that wasn't sustainable, the Republican Party said, "Let them go." What is more important? Well, we got to win this presidency. We got to win the presidency for President Hayes. We have to win. How do we do that? Well, the Democrats have gained more control in the South. So how are we going to win this election? We're going to make a compromise, and we're going to say, like, let off or whatever we have to do. You know, what do we have to do? Oh, so you're saying that you're let up, and you'll allow us to have certain electoral votes and things like that to help have President Hayes be in control, right? And what do we need? What else do we need to do? Oh, we need to remove the military from the South. Well, guess what? That's actually not a hard sell. I'm gonna tell you why from a Republican point of view back then. They're trying to now stop spending money. They're like, it's almost like a anti I don't say anti-welfare state of mind. That's partly connected into it, but they're now trying to They did what they could to save the country after Civil War. Now they want to take that money and they want to put it into railroading. They want to put it into oil. They want to put it in electricity. They want to put it in all this other stuff that they talk about in the Gilded Age. When you talk, that's so they're like, oh, you're telling me you're gonna help us win the election, and by making this compromise, we don't have to spend any more money on the soldiers and on black people? Yeah, shake my hand. Let's make this compromise. Let's get this shit done. Like, let's do this. You know, this is
What do you
also
think
why.
about? I'm
Mhm.
sorry. What
Oh,
do you think about the base renaming the bases?
um. All right, let's look at it this point. There are bases in Germany right now, right? Some that existed from the time of World War II, right? Some of these bases might have been former Germany, like German bases used by the German forces.
Mhm.
They were probably at one point named after people in the German army. Some of them as SS, some of them as lieutenants and captains and majors and colonels and generals under Hitler himself. There might even been a base named after Adolf Hitler. I'm sure those bases, them names of those bases have all been changed. And you know the reason why? Other than Hitler and Nazi Germany uh standing for all this bad stuff, who names a base after someone who lost the war? So you're
Right.
telling me if you're some of that sentiment who's like, oh, what about Fort Bragg and all this other stuff? Think about this. You got two things against you. You're now trying to advocate for a base that is named after someone who, if not is a slave owner, but someone who fought and was willing to die to maintain a particular institution called slavery. Okay.
And committed treason.
And slavery and oppression and all this stuff that goes along with it, right? All the disenfranchisement of African Americans, right? And then they lost the war.
And what about treason?
Huh?
What about treason?
And treason, which is even more important. You got three things. You got three things against you. So yes, it was a matter of time for the bases to change the names. They had to change them.
And I understand why they named them that in the first place.
It was to impose, first of all, to appreciate and remember uh parts of the lost cause culture, to say like, look, we're not losers, we just didn't win yet. We just didn't win yet. Let's change our mentalities, because at one point, if we do different measures, political, change laws, you know, like that's what took place with, segregation and, sharecropping and all these other forms of oppression. Like, we didn't lose. We just didn't win yet. We just got to keep trying in other ways. Naming a base after a Confederate leader is saying, like, we thank you for what you did. You put your life in line, you put your armies on the line to fight what we felt was important, you know?
They just did
And
something here in Alabama that I was totally against, and hear me out, I'll tell you why. They took George Wallace's name off a building in Auburn and a building in UAB. Well, first of all, he was the one that signed the act that got UAB started. Um, my proposal to that was, um, yeah, the man between him and his wife served 5 terms as governor. Um, we shouldn't erase all of our history. There should have been a plaque put up in remembrance. Okay, yes, this happened, but Governor Wallace did this right here, like with this stand in the schoolhouse door, or Governor Wallace did this. I don't think they should have took his name off the buildings of the universities, especially because he passed the Junior Trade School Act. There was Junior Trade School and College Acts, Junior College Act Trade School here in
I
Alabama
got
that
you.
thousands of people to school.
No, I got you. I got you.
And 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 the last point, and it was not an issue until somebody brought it up. I mean, these kids today, they don't, they just, that's a footnote in history with them. But somebody
Well,
brought it up
yeah,
and it gained momentum.
I get it. And I work with the last 10 minutes I have with you. And I will say that that is if my phone doesn't die on you. I will say that at any given time, because of the country, the great country we live in, home of the free land. I was it home of the brave land. Forgive me, it's late at night, so
Home free in the land of the
yeah,
brave.
my brain is
Yeah.
not working right now after working 13 hours as a as a as a trained police officer. But you know, I would say that I would say that at any given time, any territory, any building, any organization has the people who belong to have a right to have a conversation, debate, deliberations to figure out if they want to revisit or even just rename a organization or whatever it is, building. Like they can do that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think you had a right to speak your view and say this is where I stand on this. And I think those people who want to make the change, they had a right to speak on that too, right? I don't believe in sanitizing history. I don't believe in there's certain stories like like for instance, I know what it's like I felt that way when it comes to all the Bill Cosby stuff, right? Somebody I looked up to, someone who I identify with in many ways, ethnically, gender wise, my religion, everything, right? And then tear his whole being down because of, the situation with plainly
I don't
stated
believe the
the
whole
whole
story.
debate with, I mean, we'll have to have a separate conversation on that. But here's the thing. Everybody has the right to express how they feel about that. And if they want to revisit the name of something because of it, it depends on what is deemed as important during that era when they are talking about it. So, like for instance, in the case of the Bill Cosby thing, if majority of people are on a stance where they want to speak against, you know, uh, things that are actually rape and things that are even close to it, and they want to use this as a an example to really show people how bad this is and talk about um just kind of a wake up call for anybody else who wants to do some crazy stuff like this. Like we will tear you down.
Um,
And like I the same thing applies to to Confederate stuff. Um
Let me tell you a
I
quick history thing about George Wallace. In 1958, Birmingham would be Atlanta right now. 1958, he's running for governor. He's a circuit judge out of Barber County. He's running against the Attorney General, John Patterson. Wallace was the liberal on the race issue. He was endorsed by the NAACP. Patterson was endorsed by the Ku Klux Klan. Wallace comes out on Alabama Public Television the night before the runoff. He denounces the Klan. He denounces segregation. He says it's an evil institution and it's time for Alabamians to unite. He gets hammered the next night in the runoff. He pulls up to his headquarters, gets out, lights his cigars, and says, "Well, boys, I'll never be out." Says that word again.
mm,
And 4 years later, he sold his soul and went to the segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever to get elected governor.
yeah, that's what politicians, they have to win their elections. So they not all of 'em, some are don't sell out totally. There's some that don't sell out totally, but all of politicians, even the good ones, have to re-examine their ideas and what they're putting out, even if that means, all right, this thing is important to me, but in order to win this election, I'm going to shut up about it. They all have to do it. It doesn't matter if you're Republican, it doesn't matter if you're Democrat, it doesn't matter where you have to win your election. That is the mission. That's part. You can't even have your great ideas manifested if you're not in the position to make it happen. Unless here's the exception. If you're someone who's so influential and powerful and meaningful to people like Dr. King, then you don't need a freaking political position. Then you can work outside the system. And that's the reason why he was assassinated, because it's like, well, excuse my language, fuck your political position. I'm gonna still make this happen.
Well, there may not ever been anybody that powerful that was non-political in the history. I mean, that I can think of.
Well, a lot of people that had that ability to move the masses without being in political power, well, if they were not assassinated, the big popular thing now is to steal credibility from that person. This is kind of like where, and now I'm not gonna put Bill Cosby up on this whole like savior pedestal or whatever, and he's always doesn't do anything wrong. I'm not gonna do that. But what I will say is that some people make a strong argument that you know there were many like of these positive things he was doing, and he was doing in a way where he was gaining power, wealth, and authority, whether that means like ownership at NBC, whatever. Um, where there were no like in the political realm, if you don't have the position, then you have all these restrictions. You can't do X, Y, and D or whatever. He was working in a similar realm where normally, like most actors, comedians, what they're owned by somebody, they're owned by a situation, they have to move a certain way, they have to say certain things, right? In order to have he's getting to a point where he didn't need to have anybody's approval. He could just say and do whatever he wants. So those people who know of that, they're of a mentality of like, part of the reason why this aspect of his life was inflamed and make it, on such a national and global stage is because they were like, this dude was about to make some significant changes in the world. And you can't, if you assassinate somebody, I'm not just talking specifically to Bill Cosby, but I'm just saying in general. When you assassinate somebody, you you can actually make a martyr of them, and it's adverse to what you're trying to do.
Absolutely.
But when you assassinate their character and keep them alive and make them shameful while they're living, it actually can get the job done, get whatever it is that you're trying to get done. So that is a tactic that you're going to see going forward. You're gonna see less assassinations. You're gonna see more like, you know, uh, like, all right, like for instance, you're gonna see more people, like if somebody's running for somebody and you can't get anything on them, you're gonna say, well, they're associated to that person. That person is an evil, nasty person or whatever. It's like, well, yeah, you do judge somebody based on who they're associated with, but at the same time, people are individuals, and I have people that are in my circle that aren't necessarily the greatest in all the time, but that doesn't make me them.
Right.
I'm my own person.
Well, here's my
But
problem with the Cosby prosecution. You wait 25 years before you come out and make this accusation against the man. I mean, those are the issues that I have. You saw it for 25 years, and now you come up with a story, and you've got one witness.
look, that would take a whole nother conversation to get into. I would tell you that I also believe in karma too. So like sometimes you do some bad things and do it for a long time, that even when you are doing something good, that shit comes back to you. It even may be crazily, in a crazy fashion, overwhelming fashion, come back to you in a way that you don't think is like deserving of what you actually did. But that's how karma works sometimes. You think you got away with some shit, and it will come back tenfold, and that you at the peak of whatever it is that you're doing, peak of your career, or peak of whatever. And so I'm really, some people say like I'm kind of, fence sitting, but I have to stand back and really like observe certain things. Like I had to revisit some of my ideas on it. Um, I do personally feel like he was targeted in a way, especially when he was doing stuff like trying to buy NBC and things of that nature. But for me to just outwardly say that all or most of those cases that came out were not true, is a whole nother thing, and I don't think I could. I don't think I have enough backing to even
I would have
be
had
able
a
to.
hard time convicting him.
You know, um, there were there were you know a number of cases that I was just like, well, Bill, if that's what you said you did, you was kind of wild boy for doing that. You kind of you should have did that. Um, there were cases that where you're talking about where I'm just like, all right, it's 25 years later, someone says, okay, you know, rape, even though that person came to Bill Cosby's house at 3 a.m. in the morning and was drinking and partying and doing certain drugs with him and then change it. So I'm of a mentality of like, I feel like Bill Cosby definitely did some of that stuff, but I do feel like they took that little sum, they inflamed it on a monumental level because of some of the more positive stuff he was actually doing. There's stories about Bill Cosby, his land being in conflict with some like business owners, land, realtors, some associated with oil. He's conflicting with him being so high up on the class ladder, and just money wise, certain business lead. After a while, you start bumping heads with people, unless you do something like this. Is where like most African Americans, they know that they will have more success, and I have to end on this note, is when they create their own and they do like have a Marcus Garvey mentality, or they do their own and do like Tyler Perry, or they do their own and do like Oprah and make their own network. you know, those are people who are successful. Anybody else that like gains their success and power, they're probably tied up with some people that, kind of, whether you want to say they're owned or they're sponsored, they have influence over them. And if you step out of line, guess what? They remember everything about you from when you started.
Good
And
point.
they will use it against, I mean, people do that in politics. They do it in business. We see that, that's, you know, prime example. Barack Obama, he runs for president, right? He wins the election, but before they did, one of the most biggest challenges that he has to deal with is the idea that, you know, he's associated to this like controversial minister by the name of Reverend Wright. Now,
Hmm.
there's many things that Reverend Wright I agree with. There's some things, some methods, I'm like, okay, I might have to step back a little bit. But here's the thing: Barack Obama is his own person,
Yeah,
and he was just listening to admit like that. There's no way to even guarantee that every idea that Reverend Wright has, he has it. That's one
exactly.
thing. The other thing too, um, you know, the other thing is that um, uh, you know, Reverend Wright is, you can have controversial issues. I mean, that he's talking about, but that doesn't necessarily make the man like evil. It's not like Hitler or anything like that. Um, did I lose you? I
No,
was
I
just
never got good.
no.
Some of the
Well,
stuff before he was going
but
with it.
this is my point. Before I get too far out here, someone who was an ally, someone who was an ally of Barack Obama, took that vulnerable, politically a vulnerable situation, or something that could be questioned or doubted, or be cause a stir of debate and argument, use that to win their election. Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
People were saying that Republicans were trying to show a strong association between him and Reverend Wright. And the more I talk to my friends and family that are associated in politics, and they're saying, "Oh, no, 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 that was Hillary Clinton. That was." I mean, I don't know for certain because I wasn't, but I do know the more that they make this strong argument, it was Hillary Clinton that, so that was their ally. He was the ally, and she was able to take that information from where he started in politics and use that to make sure, oh well, it's okay if Barack Obama is working with us because it helps us out. But the minute that Barack Obama is now a competitor to what we're doing, now we got to bring up all the juicy stuff that can be taken advantage of and turned around to help us win our election. So if they do that in politics, they do it in business, they do that in other parts of
Absolutely.
society, But my phone is about to die, man.
Hey, let's talk again, man. I enjoyed this chat. We need
Yeah.
to
Look,
delve into some deeper stuff.
let me end on this note. Let me end on this note and say that you got conservative ideas, and I don't know if you're still associated with Republican Party or Libertarian, whatever it is. There's nothing wrong with having those ideas, in my opinion, as long as those ideas don't turn into fringe ideas and fringe behavior. The stuff when it comes to like attacking the U.S. Capitol, because like if it was
Oh
any other
Lord,
group of
oh
people,
no.
if it was any other group of people, they would attack that Capitol. We would be still talking about this story about how these people were
Yeah,
terrorists and they're this and they're that.
no.
But as soon,
I'm not like that at all.
yeah, I don't
Yeah,
get behind. I don't get behind terrorism. I don't get behind anarchy. I
no.
don't support it. I just
Mm-mm.
don't. Even if you have to fight a war, it is better to fight a war with organized armies and leaders that that are like educated, who know of strategy and things like that. Because like anarchy, I just talked about this the other day. In anarchy, everybody loses.
Yeah,
Everybody loses. Even
I mean,
even those people that can benefit from that anarchy, they lose. You protest and then you set like the target on fire, and those people that are working in that target probably working there because they don't have the strongest education or whatever, right? Now those people who you would normally be aligned with and support, now they don't have a job because you burnt down the target, you
right.
know. Same thing applies with these people that attack the US Capitol,
Yeah,
So
I mean,
people, same thing applies with the people in US Capitol. They attacked the building, a structure that they did everything they could to support and say, "Oh, we love this country, we love everybody, and this is
and
we do
taking
things the
over the
right
country,
way and follow the rules, and we can make changes in the government." And then they attack the government that they say they trust,
and they would have killed Mike Pence had that officer not slowed him
and kill
down.
some, and then kill other people that killed and
I
hurt
mean,
people that they
you remember
trust.
the African American officer that was backing up, slowly backing up, and he'd stop and slowed them down. I mean, he slowed them down just for a few seconds.
Yeah,
Um,
and
it
and then the same people are like talking about Blue Lives Matter and stuff, and they're beating up the cops and treating them like crap.
exactly,
It doesn't make
exactly.
sense. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. So people need to be having these type of conversations on the regular. Um, Especially people that have different ideas. Liberals need to be talking to conservatives. I feel like moderates need to speak up more. When Now I hate how they misuse this term, the whole silent majority. I hate it when Trump was saying this, but I honestly, in my opinion, the true silent majority are us people. People who may be on two sides of the political spectrum, but have enough sense and respect to have conversations to talk about, all right, these are my ideas and why they're different. Is there a way to make both ideas work together? And if not, if they can't work together, is there a way that we can compromise to where, all right, maybe we do your idea for a little bit, and then it'll be my turn to do my, and then you do your idea. You know, those are the silent majority.
We got to get back to
That
compromise.
Yeah, Donald freaking Donald Trump's silent majority, those people are just nuts. Those are people who put horns on their head and paint on their face and walk around half naked and talk about how they
He's
believe
a god.
Alex Jones this and they're just wild. They're just
And they think
wild.
he's a deity.
You know, it's just the stuff that they say is like the dangerous part about it is like they do find some truth. They do find some truth, but they take that thing that's like only 10% truth, and then they take like 90% that's not and mix it all together, and then they find a way to convince people that it's true, you know? And like when, like anyway, it's a long story, but anyway, I'm glad I was able to talk to you.
Yeah. And when did you
Um,
talk again? I
you should
enjoyed it.
probably you probably should list off like maybe one goal of the conversation so we know when people like watch the video, like
Well, probably what
what
I
was
may
your
do is
goal?
break it down in segments and see if I can do it like that. I'll listen to it and see if there's a way that I can break it down. Hey, we discussed this, discuss this, discuss this.
Yeah.
You know,
What was your goal for the conversation? What was your goal?
my goal was to have another in-depth conversation about.
Oh, your mic went off.
Sorry, I had a phone call come in.
Mhm.
You right now, um, not just race with black and white, but with our Latino, brothers and sisters, people of Chinese descent, natives, because it, race, and I know you said you hate that word, but it's just not, just the black and white folks. I mean, we have things with, like we were talking about with females a while ago, with sexism in there that are still alive and well in this country. And, um, I hope that we've came further um, than what we were. I know there's still a ways to go, but if I can still have conversations and understand where you're coming from, and you can understand where I'm coming from, I think it'll help people go a long way in understanding each other.
Yeah. I think my goal was to definitely get you to be able to speak about your friend who's a black Republican trying to get into either the party or committees or even run for something, and to see how that might relate to not just some of the current events, but how it relates to Civil War history. That was definitely one of my goals. Another goal too was to let you know that it is okay to have some of the ideas that you have, even though I might disagree with you. It's okay to have them if they're respectfully explained, and that your ideas and your beliefs have purpose, because uh you have to say it because it helps to
I'll
create
send you
balance
some
and
of the other
order.
stuff that I've
Even
written.
Yeah, even if my idea is better, you need to say what it is that you need to say, because by you saying it, it challenges my idea and it makes my idea better. You have to say your idea and your perspective. You have to. As long as it's not rooted in negative isms and bullshit like that, racism, ethnicism, sexism, you know, if it's not rooted in that and you're
Yeah,
saying
I'll send
is
you some of the stuff that I've written before, just because I've got a
yeah,
pragmatic way of thinking outside the box
yeah,
that people say
it's
you have a unique take on stuff. And, they
it's
can't tell
okay.
if I'm liberal or conservative on some of the stuff I'm
Yeah.
writing.
Like if it's a matter of conservatism when it comes to how money will be spent, just because somebody wants to spend money differently does not mean that it's racist.
Yeah.
However, if you're saying specifically, oh, we don't want to send money in that situation because you know what the blacks are going to do, you don't know. I don't even know what all blacks are going to do. Therefore, it is racist.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah. So, if you're talking about, better use of the money and you want to debate how the money will be used and everything, I think that that's not even a matter of like conservatism. Like people do that in the Democratic Party too. They do it in all factions along the whole spectrum, political spectrum. So I think that you need to know it's okay being a conservative. And it's okay that I don't agree with you all the time either.
And I don't expect you to, because if I had everybody that agreed with me all the time, there would be no reason for me to talk to anybody else.
No,
Yeah.
why? Like, I have people. I'm about to go in an apartment now. Me and my girl, we're both African Americans, about the same age, about what, 39, right? Mainly because it's a gender issue, and partly because I grew up on one side of the country, and she grew up on the other side. We don't agree on a bunch of stuff, and we knock heads all the time. And then there's the whole horoscope aspect of that. We're both Taurus, is always locking horns and stuff like that. So even with people that are from a similar background and stuff, they're not gonna get along. They're not gonna always get along, and they're gonna debate and stuff like that. They're going to do that, right? Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So it's okay. It's okay to. The problem is when people start, saying negative stuff, and I need to chill. Like in one of your groups, I'll make jokes, and somebody was making some comment, and I made some like little corny ass mama jokes and stuff like that. But I'm
I
even
love
gonna like on that.
I got to. I love it when y'all go after those. I mean,
I was just I some people get real sensitive. And it's funny because most of the time when I hear people talking about
they
sensitivity,
come crying to me.
yeah, it's sometimes when I hear people talking about sensitivity, most of them are on the right wing of politics, and they'll just be like, well, everybody's become a little sensitive, and they just bitching out, and they can't have conversations like we used to and just say what it is that we want to say and joke around and what. And then as soon as I say something, I don't even say anything that serious. I say something, everybody will get their, panties up in a bunch, and they still start being mad. It's just hilarious, man. The
Yeah, you had
people
that post with the uniform. And I thought, a great post of historical uniforms. That guy makes that, comment. That's when you asked me, people say this to other people, or is it just you? I just thought, a rude, totally rude comment about it.
I
That's what I
know.
thanked you for the post.
I mean, little joke. My last little joke was that whole, post with you know, was it try this in a small town? Now,
Yeah,
I don't necessarily, and I can say it from my mouth to your ears. Some people stretch the story to point basically like this guy who's singing this song is in the KKK. I don't believe that. I don't believe that. Like that, it's kind of radical out there. But the idea that this guy, he waited till everything kind of calmed down where we didn't, the waters weren't muddy and it was starting to clear up, for him to make reference to some of these like riots and stuff that took place when there was like tension all over the country, and then be like, and then use videos that don't. It's like he tried to imply that the riots that took place were associated to like some of these more progressive movements like Black Lives Matter and stuff. It's like, no, what you did was you just took videos of rioters and thieves, right? And then tried to use that as your political agenda in your song, your video. And you did it at a time where everything had calmed down, but you just want to stir it up again because like that's what I don't spend a lot of time people who just like drama and controversy.
right.
Like if you could have made a song to help us understand and to, you know, like his timing was wrong, his method was like questionable. And I thought and when I seen that meme about him and he's saying, uh try this in a small town, and below it it's like General Sherman, and he's like, I did, and you surrendered. I wouldn't even think that serious. I just thought it was hilarious because out of all of this nonsense, debate and everything like that, people could still make jokes.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
know, I just look at it as a joke. Some people are like, oh my God, how dare you? Blah blah whatever. I don't get this is crazy. I don't know.
okay, my man.
Anyway, I gotta get going, but I'll speak to you later though.
And I got a call I've got to make with somebody else coming up.
All right, love and
I enjoyed it.
respect. And when you post the video, tell me where I can see it. You know what I mean? I want to see how crazy
Yeah,
I
man, you
sound.
got to subscribe to the channel.
Yeah.
You got to help me out,
Yeah.
man. Subscribe to the channel.
All right.
Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, bro.
I'm up to 512 now, and y'all got all kinds of Civil War interviews on there,
Yeah.
like like Lucas Wilder. And
Yeah.
if you ever watch some of his videos,
Mhm.
we got a lot on there. But yeah, I'll send you links as I get some of them up.
All right.
All right,
Thank
peace, my
you.
friend. All right,
All
thank
right.
you.
All right. Love, respect. Send the same to your family and friends. All right. Yep. See you, brother.
See you, man.
All right. God bless you.